Hello! I am Shaggy. I am Philalitea. Let's try this again. Instead of being all secretive and mysterious and taking a long time to build up what we're doing, I'll just tell you outright this time. I've found the I've found the play chaptered Prometheus Bound in this collection of Aeschylus's work, or at least work that we believe is attributable to Aeschylus. And it turns out that today's going to be a warm day, so I'm probably going to have to get out of the tent, which is a good thing that I chose to just buy a chair on debt. So if you want to reward me for that, you know how. Likes, subscribes. My tip jar and my Patreon are in my profile. Okay, so let's make sure that we're in the right frame of mind, because if you're in the wrong frame of mind when you're reading anything, it's just not going to hit you right. So as we're listening, in your case, or as we're reading, right, as we're going through this, we want to be reminded that plays were done on festival days, and festival days are what we would today call holidays. So for example, Father's Day is approaching, or Mother's Day just passed. On those days, there would be festival days, and there would be competitions among playwrights to make Father's or Mother's Day themed plays. And so I don't know, obviously, what festival Prometheus Bound was written for, but it's the first of 3 plays, and we don't have the second 2. So as we go through and we're reading this, we have to realize that even though these are well-established mythological characters in the context, and like the case of Prometheus was, as far as we know, innovated by Hesiod sometime around 700 BC. This was written sometime around 500 BC. So this is a well-established character we're going to be diving into, but this is going to be when the character was established in the way that we think of it, not in the way that Hesiod and the people between these two things thought of it. Prometheus's name means forethought. And so when they're saying his name, they're saying capital forethought. They aren't saying a word that sounds like a name to us. Prometheus just sounds like a name to us. But in their lingual and their literary convention, words, there were ways, I can never remember what it's called, because I'm not a linguist, and so I just don't try to remember. Even for the context of a conversation with Gemini, I can just never remember what it's called. But there's I think it's called nominatives. Nominatives? I'm not sure. But anyway, there's a way to distinguish between a thing, a name of something, like an apple, or a Steve that you do know, you, the person that I'm speaking to, and a way to declare a Steve that you don't know, or even a general Steve. So, an apple, this apple, apple. You see what I'm saying? Okay. And so that's going on with Prometheus. That's going on with all of the characters in this. They don't just intuitively or subtextually or sort of internally understand these things. There's no implication going on. There's no inference going on. These things are, because of the nature of their language, they're things that are right out on the surface everybody's thinking about, because these are also scripture. And so I thought for a moment very seriously about, instead of reading this today, reading for you some of the prophets from the Hebrew tradition, to show you that their holy days, their festival days, the works of art and culture that they remembered and that they worshiped, that they were suppliant to in the memory of the suppliant maidens, were very different. Because they were different people. And so, something that I'm always thinking about is, I once heard I guess I am doing a long introduction to this, deal with it. I once heard a Freemason say that you can't approach God, you can't approach the highest realities from a magic or philosophical or wisdom tradition that's not your native tradition, because you can't understand it, because it's not in your language. And the thing that he didn't understand as a Freemason is that Christianity and Judaism don't even come from his language family. So it's actually impossible for people who look like me to arrive at wisdom through Christianity and Buddhism, was his opinion. Now, whether I agree or not, I don't know, because an American looks, acts, talks just like me, just was elected pope. So maybe I'm wrong, Or maybe postmodernism, the idea that you can do whatever the fuck you want and anybody can be anything, is just demonstrably wrong. But that's not what we're here to talk about, and that's not what we're here to think about. Today, we're here to think about how ancient Greek people participated in their religion and why maybe Shaggy prefers them to what's available to him, and maybe that's why Shaggy has to do the things that Shaggy does and the way that Shaggy does them. And so maybe that gives Shaggy just value in his own right for understanding a way of life that you've never even known existed. And so we begin with Prometheus Bound's argument. And so the way this works is we're about to get a lot of characters. And the way this works is they would come out on stage and they would have a particular mask, and everybody knew who that mask represented. And so this is the person that's giving the argument, who's explaining basically the setup of the play. In the beginning, Uranos and Gaia held sway over heaven and earth, and manifold children were born unto them, of whom were Kronos and Okeanos and the Titans and the giants. But Kronos cast down his father Uranos and ruled in his stead, until Zeus his son cast him down in his turn, and became king of gods and men. Then were the Titans divided, for some had goodwill unto Kronos, and others had unto Zeus, until Prometheus, son of the Titan Iapetus, by wise counsel gave the victory to Zeus. But Zeus held the race of mortal men in scorn, and was fain to destroy them from the face of the earth. Yet Prometheus loved them, and gave secretly to them the gift of fire, and arts whereby they could prosper upon the earth. Then was Zeus sorely angered with Prometheus, and bound him upon a mountain, and afterward overwhelmed him in an earthquake, and devised other torments against him for many ages. Yet could he not slay Prometheus, for he was a god. Okay, so it's important that you understand, first of all, that the translator capitalized God here, so that means the kind of God that we all know, not the general kind of God, and not the specific one you don't know. You see what I'm saying here? Lots and lots of complex stuff going on here, and this is basically saying, like if we were to read from Torah, this is basically saying, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, and then he created all of these lesser powers, these lesser archons that did their things. And then through the course of time, because we all know this story, because we've all heard Hesiod's works and days, and Theogony, so many times we're sick of hearing it. Humans were made. And then there's the whole story about the flood and the humans and all of this. But that's not yet, because we're not telling that story. We're actually telling the story about how God, Zeus, planned to do these things, but Prometheus got in the way. And there's this book in the Hebrew non-canon, or rather the Jewish and Christian and Abrahamic non-canon, called the Book of Enoch, that has almost that same setup, and is somewhere between 250 and 750 years after this book. So you tell me where the literary inspiration came from. Okay. And so now we're going to go through the dramatis personae, which means the people in this play. So our characters are Strength and Force, Hephaestus, Prometheus, the chorus of sea nymphs, the daughters of Okeanos, Io, and Hermes. Part of why I thought that the Suppliant Maidens play was this play that I'm reading is Io. Io is in both of them, or at least is featured in both of them. Io speaks in this one. She doesn't speak in Suppliant Maidens. But the maidens are suppliants of Io. And so Asclepius, if he wrote both of these, he's a person with a bias. And maybe he was a suppliant himself of Io. It's not impossible at all that a poet and playwright could be devoted to one god or one goddess and then spend their career channeling that thing's wisdom in order to make a career. We call these people polytheist because we have a postmodern, post-Christian bias that worshiping even one god is just so much work. It's just so much time and money spent out of your day being distracted by things. But like, I don't think anybody was ever polytheist. The way that humans engaged in the supernatural before Christianity was, and even Jews were this way, was called henotheism, where you acknowledged all of the different aspects and manifestations of the panpsychic reality as one thing, and then you just devoted yourself to one aspect of it, because who's got the fucking time to devote themselves to more than one aspect of divinity? This is why in his funeral oration, when Pericles stops to wax poetic, he actually acknowledges, I'm going to wax poetic, because even though I'm not a good orator and I'm not a poet, women are this important. When he stops to wax poetic about the importance of women in Athens during this grinding multi-year war that he's anticipating, what he stops and what he waxes on is the fact that married women are actually suppliant to the shrines of their husbands' families. And so what they're doing is, while they're worshiping exactly in the same way that Penelope goes and throws herself in suppliance at the feet of Nike, right, in Odysseus, all works I've read for you. I'm referring to books that I've read for you so that we can have a shared language and a shared understanding of these themes and the way they were handled when we turn to Plato. Because Plato is a genius, he's not a syncretist, he is an innovator, and he's telling everybody in his time that the way they're thinking about their own religion and culture is upside down and inside out. So in order for you to understand Plato, you have to understand everybody around him in order to understand how he's telling them they're wrong, because what he's not telling them is the right answer. He's just telling them they're wrong because he's not a Hebrew prophet. And if he's speaking for a goddess, he's speaking for Aletheia, and he's speaking for Sophia. And like Lao Tzu, he knows that the true wisdom, the true truth, can't be spoken. It's the one thing that can't be spoken. You have to live it. You have to experience it for yourself. Otherwise, everything you say about it approaches meaninglessness. Exactly like the first poem of the Tao Te Ching. All of these things I'm reading for you because they are a meta-education that will snap you awake in the way that the woke movement and every other guru and cult leader claims that they can do. And look, I'm doing it for free, y'all. I don't really actually care if I get rich off this. I just know that it's valuable enough that someday I could be as rich as Plato. Do you know how rich Plato was? Plato made 2,000 drachma a day on average. A drachma is what it requires to eat and sleep for a day in the city of Athens. And so that means on my budget, if my budget is a drachma, that means a drachma is $4 a day. That means he made $8,000 a day. A day. Plato did. And you know how he did it? He did it by posting himself up on the corners of markets and in parties and reading works like the one that I'm going to read for you. He kept the religious every day. He kept vigil for Socrates every day, not just on the holidays. Something to do about nothing, indeed. Strength begins. I'm assuming that Strength is a male character, and so we're going to do Strength as a male character. Lo, the earth's bound and limitary land, the Scythian steppe, the waste untrod of men. Look to it now, Hephaestus, thine it is, thy sire obeying, this arch thief to clench against the steep down precipice of rock, with stubborn links of adamantine chain. Look thou, thy flower, the gleaming plastic fire, he stole and lent to mortal man, a sin that gods immortal make him rue today, lessoned hereby to own the omnipotence of Zeus and to repent his love to man. And then Hephaestus speaks, and we know that Hephaestus is husband to Aphrodite, right? That he's the blacksmith of the gods, and he's the if you insist on anthropomorphizations of these characters, he's the anthropomorphization of the primordial lava of volcanoes. In other words, the Mediterranean had been inhabited long enough that people had watched, human beings had watched islands form out there. Okay, I had to move. It was too hot in there. Because as we said in one of the last two that I recorded, if you take these gods' names at face value, Aphrodite's name means sea foam, which means that the marriage of lava and sea foam creates islands in the Mediterranean. Sort of what that's going on there. And so Hephaestus responds to Strength by saying, "O strength and force, for you the best of Zeus, stands all achieved, and nothing bars your will. But I dare not bind to storm-vexed cleft, one of our race, immortal as are we. Yet, none the less, necessity constrains, for Zeus, defied, is heavy in revenge." To Prometheus he then says, "O deep devising child of Themis sage, small will have I to do, or thou to bear, what yet we must. Beyond the haunt of man, unto this rock, with fetters grimly forged, I must transfix and shackle up thy limbs, where thou shalt mark no voice nor human form, but, parching in the glow and glare of sun, the body's flower shall suffer a sky change. And gladly wilt thou hail the hour when night shall in her starry robe invest the day, or when the sun shall melt the morning rime. But, day or night, forever shall the load of wasting agony that may not pass, wear thee away. For know, the womb of time hath not conceived a power to set thee free. Such meed thou hast for love toward mankind, for thou, a god-defying wrath of gods, beyond the ordinance didst champion men, and for reward shalt keep a sleepless watch, stiff-kneed, erect, nailed to this dismal rock, with manifold laments and useless cries against the will inexorable of Zeus. Hard is the heart of fresh usurped power." And so if you understand what's happening there, basically what he's just said is because there's no visual element. These are just people standing in particular robes with big masks with amplifying mouths. Basically, they've got cones in the mouths that allow the volume of their voices to amplify. There's no acting going on. Like there's maybe dancing, there's maybe like some pantomime, but there's nothing approaching what you think of as acting in the modern sense. And so these characters, they have to describe what they're doing and why, because like you can't just have a scene where Hephaestus is banging him to the rock and you just kind of know. First of all, many of the people can't actually see the stage. Everything is too small. And so like a modern convention of having a set and like actually going through the action and it being silent and dramatic while it happens, like that's not what these plays are about. That's not how this goes. And so basically what Hephaestus has explained is what we all know, that Prometheus is bound to a rock within the earth on the command of Zeus. But what this is showing us is that Zeus has Hephaestus do it, and Hephaestus is kind of lamenting it. He's like, buddy, I don't really want to do this, but we're all bound to Zeus's will, so if I disobey Zeus, I'm going to have a similar fate. As he says, hard is the heart of fresh usurped will. And so what he's saying is like revenge is a dish best served with chains on a rock under the earth. And then Strength says, "Enough of useless ruth. Why tarriest thou? Why pitiest one whom all gods wholly hate? One whom to man gave o'er thy privilege?" Hephaestus, "Kinship and friendship wring my heart for him. Aye, but how disregard our sire's command? Is not the pity weaker than thy fear? Ruthless as ever, brutal to the full." And you understand what they're saying, that Strength is saying, like is your pity really so much weaker than your fear? Like your pity for Prometheus really so much weaker than your fear for Zeus? Be a man, be strong, stand up, rise against Zeus. And Hephaestus says, yeah, no. Basically, he calls him ruthless as ever, brutal to the full. And Strength says, Tears can avail him nothing. Strive not thou, nor waste thine efforts thus unaidingly. And basically what he's saying is that tears can't help him, so quit crying. And Hephaestus says, Out on my cursed mastery on steel! Why curse it thus? In sooth, that craft of thine standeth assoiled of all that here is wrought. Would that some other were endowed therewith. He's saying, I wish that somebody else had to do this. All hath its burden, saith the rule of heaven, and freedom is for Zeus, and Zeus alone. And so you have to understand that these aren't just gods that are having this conversation. These are gods having these conversation for the privy of mortals. And so if immortals are subject to Zeus's whims, then immortals, Zeus wants to kill all the mortals at the time that this conversation is going on. And so when he says, when freedom is for Zeus and Zeus alone, he's making a theological statement. This isn't just a mythological statement. This isn't just a poetic statement. This is a theological statement. To which Hephaestus responds, I know it. I gainsay no word hereof. Up then, and hasten to do on his bonds. Let Zeus behold the indolent of will. And so what he's saying, he's mocking him. Strength is mocking him. He's saying, then do it quickly. Let's go. Let's be done of this. Let's see you be pious to Zeus. Let's see it. Ah, well, behold the armlets ready now. Then cast them round his arms, and with sheer strength swing down the hammer, clench him to the crags. Lo, 'tis toward, no weakness in the work. Smite harder, wedge it home, no faltering here. He hath a craft can pass them passable. And so the craft there, he doesn't mean that he's better at blacksmithing than Hephaestus. What he's saying is that he's witty, he's clever, and that if you don't make these iron bonds fast around his arms and his legs, he's going to escape, and you will be held responsible, Hephaestus. To which Hephaestus responds, This arm is fast, inextricably bound. Then shackle safe the other, that we know his utmost craft is weaker far than Zeus. He, but none other, can accuse mine art. Now, strong and sheer, drive throw from back, breast to back, the adamantine wedge's stubborn fang. Sorry, the sun keeps wanting to move, which is a funny thing to say, but it's making it hard for me to read sometimes. Alas, Prometheus, I lament thy pain. Thou, faltering and weeping sore for those whom Zeus abhors, where, lest thou rue thy tears? Thou gazest on a scene that poisons sight. I gaze on one who suffers his desert. Now, between rib and shoulder, shackle him. Now, you gotta understand, he's piercing his body to the rock. Like, we're not talking about just chains around his arms and feet. We're talking about he's hooking. I mean, this is kind of a saw situation. Like, he's binding these loops that would go around his arms or around his legs. He's binding them through networks of his bones, like his ribs or like his clavicle. He's binding his body. It's gruesome. It really is. Lo, it is done. 'Twas but a moment's toil. Now, strongly strike, drive in the piercing gyves. Stern is the power that oversees thy task. Brutish thy form, thy speech brutality. Be gentle, and thou wilt, but blame not me, for this my stubbornness and anger fell. Let us go hence, his legs are firmly chained. And then Strength says to Prometheus, Aha! There, play the insolent and steal, for creatures of a day the knights of gods. O deep delusion of the powers that named thee, Prometheus, the forethinker, thou hast need. Of others' forethought and device whereby thou mayst elude thy handcrafts of ours. And then so we lose Hephaestus' strength and force as characters on stage. And Prometheus, evidently alone, says, O sky divine, O winds of pinions swift, O fountainheads of rivers, and thou, illimitable laughter of the sea. O earth, the mighty mother, and thou sun, whose orbed light surveyeth all, attest what ills I suffer from the gods. A god, behold me, who must here sustain the marrying agonies of pain, wrestling with torture, doomed to bear eternal ages, year on year. Such and so shameful is the chain which heaven's new tyrant doth ordain to bind me helpless here. Woe for the ruthless present doom! Woe for the future's teeming womb! On what far dawn and what dim skies shall star of my deliverance rise? Truce to this utterance. To its dimmest verge I do foreknow the future hour by hour, nor can whatever pang may smite me now smite with surprise. The destiny ordained I must endure to the best, for well I wot that none may challenge with necessity. Yet is it past my patience to reveal or to conceal these issues of my doom, since I to mortals brought prerogatives, until this durance dismal I am bound. Yea, I am he who in a fennel stalk by stealthy sleight pervade the fount of fire, the teacher, proven thus an arch resource of every art that aideth mortal men. Such was my sin, I earn its recompense, rocket riveted and chained in height and cold. Listen, what breath of sound, what fragrance soft hath risen upward to me. Is it some godlike essence, or being half divine, or mortal presence? Who to the world's end comes unto my craggy prison? Craves he the sight of pain, or what would he behold? Gaze on a god and tortures manifold, heinous to Zeus and scorned by all whose footsteps tread the heavenly hall. Because too deeply from on high I pitied man's mortality. Hark, and again, that fluttering sound of winds that whir and circle round, and their light rustle thrills the air. How all things that unseen draw near are to me fair. Fear. And then enter the chorus of Okeanides and winged cars. And so there are sets and props to some amount, like he might be sitting on a thing that looks like a rock, like a big rock or something like that, and then they come in winged cars, which doesn't really mean like they come in the wing and like winged, and those aren't wings that are outstretched, those are obviously wings that are laid back, but we're not talking about like you would do for like a middle school or a high school play where you would have like what are those, like derby cars, right? Like the boxcar derby cars pushed by other kids and they're just pushed out onto the thing. These are probably people that are carried out on biers, I think is what they're called. You know, like, I can never remember what those were called, but they were called cars, hand cars, where they had the two poles that ran through underneath the seat, and then 4 people or more would carry them. That's probably more like what we're seeing here. We're probably seeing more like, have you ever seen like Tunnel of Love swan boats? We're probably seeing those on poles and people are carrying them out. Probably. I don't know. I'm not trying to act like I do know. I just want that to be very clear. But this doesn't have the cute limitation in craft that a middle school or a high school musical or play would have. You understand, like people aren't going like, the Okeanides are on little cars. This is very serious business. And so the chorus are women, but they're all played by men. So I'm not being irreverent, and I'm most certainly not trying to be harmful to women. But like, I also just don't like the sound of my falsetto. So like, hear us not, is just not how I plan to do this. Hear us not, or fear us not. As friends with rivalry of swiftly vying wings, we came together unto this rock. And thee, with our sea sire we pleaded hard, until we won him to our will. And swift the wafting breezes bore us hither, So you understand that what she's saying is that they came there with the permission of Poseidon. And if you remember in Odysseus, which again I've read, you can find it on the channel. Poseidon and Zeus don't exactly always play nice, which is why I constantly say that I don't understand why my childhood education taught the three of them, Zeus, Hades, and Poseidon, as equally powered brothers in competition, because I've just never seen that portrayal in a poem or a play or anywhere other than where I was taught it in middle school. And so I just really don't know where it came from. It must have come from Ovid, is all I can figure. And I haven't read much more of Ovid than Metamorphoses. And so anyway, the point here is that I'm sitting outside and my sinuses are acting up. But moreover, that these Oceanides or Okeanides they're sea nymphs, they're sea goddesses that come as a collection, and there's always a chorus. And so the chorus is usually telling what everybody, I mean, if you can remember the last one, it's usually telling what one character or a group of characters feels. And they're typically reacting with the audience's perspective to what's going on. And so basically what they're saying is that with permission of Poseidon, we are here to speak on behalf of the audience to interview Prometheus chained to his rock beneath the, what are those called? The pillars of Hercules, or Heracles in this language. The heavy hammer's steely blow thrilled to our ocean cavern from afar, banished soft shyness from our maiden brow, and with unsandaled feet we come in winged car. I would just like to say something for modern poets, especially rappers and lyricists. I don't consider hip-hop lyrics. Anyway, notice that these great authors of the past don't double up their adjectives. So what they didn't say is the hammer's heavy steely blow. They say the heavy hammer's steely blow. They separate their adjectives, because these poets are actually inclined and sort of encouraged to use as many adjectives as possible. It fleshes out the poem. It keeps the poem from ending, and it kind of proves how good you are. To this Prometheus responds. Basically what they've said is, we've come to talk to you. And Prometheus responds to that with, well a day! Ye come, from the sea mother's teeming home, children of Tethys and the sire, who around earth rolls gyre on gyre, his seepless ocean tide. And so for people, I used to get into big arguments, like with my most recent ex-girlfriend, had a master's in history, and we used to argue all the fucking time, where she was like, pre-modern people before Copernicus, they didn't know the world was round. Okay, well, Aeschylus did. Who around earth rolls, gyre on gyre? Asclepius knew. Look on me, shackled with what chain? Upon this chasm's beetling side I must my dismal way sustain. Yea, I behold, Prometheus, and my fears drawing swiftly o'er mine eyes a mist fulfilled of tears, when I behold thy frame bound, wasting on the rock and put to shame by adamantine chains. The rudder and the rule of heaven are to strange pilots given. Zeus, with his new laws and strong caprice holds sway, unkings the ancient powers their might constrains, and thrusts their pride away. Had he but hurled me far beneath the vast and ghostly halls of death, down to the limitless profound of Tartarus, in fetters bound, fixed by his unrelenting hand, so had no man nor God on high exulted o'er mine agony. But now, a sport to wind and sky, mocked by my foes I stand. And so you understand what he's saying. I wish he had just thrown me down to hell, but hell didn't exist here. Yet. Hell as we understand it, as Dante conceived it, just doesn't exist in this century. The chorus says,
What god can wear such ruthless heart as to delight in ill? Who in thy sorrow bears not part? Zeus, Zeus alone, for he with wrathful will, clinched and inflexible, bears down heaven's race, nor end shall be till hate his soul shall satiate, or till by some device some other hand shall wrest from him his sternly clasped command. Yet, though in shackles close and strong I lie in wasting torments long, yet the new tyrant, 'neath whose nod cowers down each blessed subservient god, one day far hence my heap shall need the destined stratagem to read, whereby in some yet distant day Zeus shall be reaved of pride and sway, and no persuasion's honed spell shall lure me on the tale to tell. I'm going to stop there in the middle of the paragraph. First thing I'd like to point out that the rhyming scheme I fucking love, and I like how they'll rhyme sometimes in the middle of a sentence. I'm not doing the, I think this is Ionic or, I know it's pentameter. It might be heptic. I don't know the word. I'm not a poem guy. But it reads with a da 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 da, I think is the pattern of the rhythm, and so sometimes the rhymes don't need to come at the end like they do in English. Did I say iambic? No, I said Ionic. I think it might be iambic pentameter. And so anyway, what he's saying is that until Zeus is dead, he's going to be chained down there, and it's a bummer because even Aphrodite's handmaiden persuasion won't ultimately be able to convince him. And you remember that the poem opened with persuasion can convince anybody. And no stern threat shall make me cower, and yield the secret to his power, until his purpose be foregone, and shekels yields and he atone, and the deep despite that he hath done. Chorus. O strong in hardihood, thou striv'st amain against the stress of pain, and yet too free, too resolute thy tongue, and challenging thy wrong. Shuddering dread doth make my spirit quiver, and o'er thy fate sits fear. I see not to what shore of safety ever thy bark can steer. In depths unreached the will of Zeus doth dwell, hidden, implacable. That's how they talked. It's got a rhyme. And so the artistic license isn't just in what does in fact rhyme. It's in how you pronounce the words to force the rhyme. And so Prometheus responds, Aye, stern as Zeus in justice stands, wrenched to his purpose in his hands. Yet shall he learn perforce to know a milder mood when falls the blow. His ruthless wrath he shall lay still, and he and I with mutual will in concord's bond shall go. And so what he's saying effectively is that, like, that if he were in a milder mood, Prometheus would apologize and probably never do anything like that again, because how do I want to say this? A transgression against God as serious as stealing fire. For example, the Book of Enoch, which we might turn around and read next. But that can't ever happen again, because what is he going to steal it for the humans that humans make? The lesser beings that humans make? That doesn't make sense. Unless you start to think about AI and robots and androids and cyborgs, and then maybe you'll be inclined to check out what I've been doing with the last sandcastle. Okay. The chorus continues. Unveil, say forth to us the tale entire, under what imputation Zeus laid hands on thee to rack thee thus with shameful pangs. Tell us, unless the tale pain thee, all. Grievous alike are these things for my tongue, grievous for silence, rueful every way. Know that, when first the gods began their strife, and heaven was all astir with mutual feud, some willing to fling Kronos from his throne, and set forsooth their Zeus on high as king, and others, some in contrariety, striving to bar him from heaven's throne. For I means ever. Excuse me one moment, I am going to cough. Okay, sorry about the interruption. Thereon I sought to counsel for the best the Titan brood of Ouranos and Earth. Yet I prevailed not, for they held in scorn my glozing wiles, and, in their hardy pride, deemed that without effort they could grasp the sway. But for my sake my mother Timus oft, and Earth, one symbol of names manifold, had held me warned. Now, in futurity. I don't like how I said that word. That's a hard word to say. Futurity. It stood ordained that not by force or power, but by some wile, the victors must prevail. In such wise I interpreted, but they deigned not to cast their heed thereon at all. Then, of things possible, I deemed it best, joining my mother's wisdom to my own, to range myself with Zeus, two wills in one. Thus, by device of mine, the murky depth of Tartarus enfoldeth Kronos old, and those who strove beside him. Such the aid I gave the Lord of Heaven, my need, for which he paid me thus a penal recompense. For 'tis the inward vice of tyranny to deem of friends as being secret foes. Now, to your question, hear me clearly show on what imputed fault he tortures me. Scarce was he seated on his father's throne when he began his doles of privilege among the lesser gods, allotting power and trim division, while of mortal men nothing is recked, nor of their misery, nay, even willed to blast their race entire to nothingness, and breed another brood, and none but I was found to cross his will. I dared it, I alone. I rescued men from crushing ruin and the abyss of hell, therefore am I constrained in chastisement. Grievous to bear and piteous to behold, yea, firm to feel compassion for mankind. Myself was held unworthy of the same. I, beyond pity am I ranged and ruled, to sufferance, a sight that shames his sway. And so it's important that you understand that offering this play of worship to Prometheus may have been the first time this was ever done since Hesiod created him and Theogony. This might have been the first time anybody stopped because of what Aeschylus has Prometheus say right here, or at least the author, if it's not Aeschylus. And the ghost of the author of this book is not watching or listening to me read. But he or she might be. There's a non-zero chance. Other people have believed it, and so I leave it open because I don't know. I have no way of knowing. I can't verify that it's not happening. And as we all know, that absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. And so just because I don't feel like I'm being watched in any particular way more than I've got this camera here and the expectation that eventually somebody in the future might watch this. Hello, future audience. I do think that what the author is telling us here with the line, yea, firm to feel compassion for mankind, myself was held unworthy of the same. What he's saying is that he felt compassion, and compassion is more than empathy. Compassion means with feeling. It means that you feel what they feel. You share their feelings, and you can only share somebody's feelings if you have the same emotional response that they have. And so basically what Aeschylus is telling us is that there was a time in human history when human time, because history is a little bit different than human time. History is the recorded part, and we're only
in the early parts of recorded Greek history. But what Aeschylus is telling us is, whether his audience knows it or not, recorded time, recorded history from Aeschylus goes back about 3,000 years. And human time, I am of the opinion that these Greek poets were able to reach back into a misty memory via their own sort of linguistics to a Proto-Indo-European circa 5000 BCE. But there's evidence that if they were really clever and they were really doing their best work, they were able to remember the transition from huts and temporary shelters to walled cities. And that happened for the Indo-Europeans circa 3000 BC. But it happened for humanity circa 7000 BC. So when alt history guys are talking about, but these stories, they really seem to remember a history or a human time before the Ice Age, they're wrong. They're wrong. Even when Plato in Timaeus casts back 9,000 years before his own time, which would have been 11,000 BC, deliberately what he's doing is casting back twice as far as the Indo-European language family possibly could have remembered, because the Indo-European language family is only 7,000 years old from us, which means it's only about 4,000 years old from him, 4,500. And so if he doubles that suggests that he knew how old Indo-European was, maybe, and that anything that Indo-European could have known, Atlantis is twice as old as that, is what he's trying to say. And so what he's saying in Timaeus is that any way that you could possibly argue with the antiquity of my knowledge is impossible, because even as old as your cult claims to be, my cult information is twice as old. And so I get into arguments with Gemini about this a lot, because I'm not allowed to talk to other humans, and I ask Gemini deliberately to maintain a consensus opinion and to not just agree with me because my arguments are good, to really debate me on this stuff. And one of the things that I'm constantly pushing back on consensus is that they want to just disregard claims of antiquity, because modern people make claims of ancient knowledge and the antiquity of ancient knowledge. But the claim being truthful doesn't matter. The claim being made needs to be tracked. Somebody needs to be sitting down with a timeline and saying, all right, here's a claim, here's a claim, here's a claim, and they need to be compared, because I guarantee you they started reasonable and they got unreasonable over time, just like the genealogies that led to the Wars of the Roses. And I know I haven't been talking about Prometheus for a very long time. But when I listen to people read Prometheus, my mind goes to these places, and then I lose massive chunks of the poetry. And so this is the Shaggy Dog. This is the Philaletheia. This is my method. This is my method. And so what I'm telling you is what an historian would tell you. I agree with the historical consensus. No Greek person alive in Athens circa 500 BCE had any idea whatsoever what the late Bronze Age collapse of the Mediterranean, the Dark Age, the end of the Mycenaeans, no idea what that was like. They didn't even know what the time of Hesiod 200 to 300 years before was like. They didn't even know whether Homer was one person or many people. 200 to 300 years removed from Homer. So a complicated and sophisticated argument that they could remember anything beyond 200 years before them, if they couldn't even remember their own culture heroes, that would be like us forgetting key details of George Washington. That would be like us, for example, not knowing that George Washington had orchards that produced a fuckload of apple cider, and that's where his money came from. And in fact, that's where a lot of the money for the war came from. That would be like us totally not knowing that at all about him, and thinking that George Washington was the name of all of the founding fathers and all of their contributions to the early foundation of our country, which is something that oral traditions will do after about 300 years. They'll start to reduce names because the complexity. You've seen what it looks like when they go through oral, like when they go through names lists and begats lists in these poems. It can get fucking boring. Kind of like me contextualizing all of this. So if you don't hate me contextualizing all of this, I need to know in the comments. And if I've left any meat on the bone, I need to know where your questions are in the comments. Thank you for watching. 50 minutes is pretty impressive. I'm going to reread the last bit of this Prometheus quotation, and then we're going to go on to the chorus response. Yea, firm to feel compassion for mankind, myself was held unworthy of the same. Ah, but pity am I ranged and ruled to sufferance, a sight that shames his sway. And so, what he's saying is that even humans have forgotten about him on some level. That he felt compassion for humans, but humans don't feel compassion for him. And so Aeschylus is taking the time, and in an act of bravery that could have been seen as impiety, could have been seen as blasphemy, could have been seen as pharmakon, absolutely could have gotten him exiled, if not murdered, just like what happened to Socrates, what's happened to me in a lot of ways. Prometheus is down here under the earth, lamenting that humans don't even remember him for what he's done. And the chorus responds, a heart of steel, a mold of stone were he, who could complacently behold thy pains. I came here not as craving for this sight, and seeing it I stand heart wrung with pain. What she's saying is that I didn't come here to see you hurt, and it would require somebody with a heart of steel not to be compassionate for you, having seen you in this way. And so, again, the chorus is there to tell the audience what they're supposed to be feeling. And so, the audience doesn't know Prometheus. They don't know this Prometheus. Yea, truly, kindly. Yea, truly, kindly eyes must pity me. Say, didst thou push transgression further still? So did you, upon giving fire to humans, did you do anything worse? Did you do anything else to piss Zeus off? And Prometheus responds, Aye, man through me ceased to foreknow his death. I think what he's saying is that he made it so that humans could no longer foresee their deaths. This is an interesting question. I've never heard this claim, and I've never heard people talk about this passage. And so the chorus asks, what cure couldst thou discover for this curse? And so when I talk about he could be pharmakon, that's important because I began reading all of this stuff, and the way that I began this podcast to talk about pharmakon, to read for you what Derrida has to say about pharmakon, because I'm not the only person that's noticed this, and I am most certainly not the only person that's noticed that it's being occulted, it's being kept secret, like Prometheus himself and academe, probably because it's just a really big conversation to have, and probably because modern neoliberal pseudo-Greeks, pseudo-democrats want to believe that Greece was perfect and that Greece didn't have any of these ancient traditions. But let me just explain to you a very ancient tradition that is very alive in the Greece of this time, and that the author is discussing as being very ancient and where it came from. The idea of the scapegoat. You might have seen some of my work on that with the Jewish tradition, but it was alive and well in the Greek tradition too, and they called it pharmakon. That's where our pharmacist comes from. And what they did is they worked in medicines, and they worked in curses. They worked in alleviating curses, and they worked in alleviating pain. And so basically what she's saying is, she's like, well, were you pharmakon?
did he accuse you accurately of being pharmakon? Because what would happen is these were people who were typically outsiders, and so a Titan in the triune structure of Titan, Olympian, and human is an outsider in the human world who gave the humans a cure for the curse of foreknowledge of their deaths and fire, which can be both a cure or a poison. This is Pharmakon. He is talking about Pharmakon. He is talking about the Pharmakon tradition, he being Asclepius. Not Asclepius, I'm sorry. Aeschylus. I keep saying Asclepius because Asclepius is the god that had Asclepius's rod, the serpent-twined staff of healing. And so I'm thinking about all of this healing magic, because back then, when you say that the best they could do was an aspirin and a prayer, the prayer was the more effective part of their medicine. The prayer was the real part. And so when the chorus asks, what cure could you offer for this? What I'm not saying is the part that's left implied, implicit in the scapegoat. A pharmakon whose cure didn't work could be exiled, or worse. Jesus was probably considered pharmakon to the Greek-speaking people in that area. And Prometheus responds to what cure he could offer by saying, blind hopes I sent to nestle in man's heart. This was a goodly gift thou gavest them. Yet more I gave them, even the boon of fire. What? Radiant fire to things ephemeral? This isn't real fire. When he says radiant fire, he's talking about supernatural knowledge. You didn't see me touch the brim of my hat. He's talking about foresight. He's talking about insight. He's talking about mystical knowledge. That fire. The fire from within. If you're a Tool fan, the fire of the Lateralis eye. Yea, many an art too shall they learn thereby. And so if you've read the Book of Enoch, and I probably am just going to bounce straight to the Book of Enoch off of this, the same claims are being made of, I believe it's Azazel, and the scapegoat demon of Deuteronomy. I'm pretty sure it's Deuteronomy that has the scapegoat ritual, is the same demon that the author of Enoch has buried under the ground and attributes all iniquity, all sin, including art, all the arts, so jewelry, makeup, all of it. And Prometheus is about to attribute all that to himself. Then, upon imputation of such guilt, does Zeus without surcease torment thee thus? Is there no limit to thy course of pain? None, till his own will shall decree an end. And how shall he decree it? Say what hope? Seest thou not thy sin? Yet of that sin it irks me sore to speak, as thee to hear. Nay, no more words hereof, bethink thee now. From this ordeal, how to find release? And so you got to understand here that the word sin means error, and the pathological terror of committing a sin that can get you bound to a rock like this requires having engaged with this in the near modern era. You have to have read this book in order to be concerned about this being done to you by a capricious God, and you have to think of the Christian God as capricious, which Jesus doesn't, so I don't know why you do. In fact, I don't know why Catholicism does. It's just why I'm not a Catholic. Prometheus responds, easy it is for one whose foot is set outside the slough of pain to lessen well with admonitions him who lies therein. And so, yeah, the people who show up to my channel, especially my shorts, my lives, and want to admonish me, give me, how does he put it, outside the slough of pain to lessen well his admonitions, with admonitions him who lies therein. What he's saying is that people who want to come from outside your life, Elliot Smith said it better when he said that everybody thinks they know, but they just don't. Everybody thinks. Actually, I don't remember the Elliot Smith line now that I need to quote it. Let me find it, because I want to quote poetry with poetry.